So this Sunday, February 7th, there's going to be a special event held here in the United States, and in some ways it's become indistinguishable from a national holiday. It's called the Super Bowl, the championship of the National Football League. Now hold up, before any of you outside of America or those who hate sports click away, I promise I'm going to be talking about a video game today. In fact, it's one of the greatest video games ever made. It also happens to be a football game, which may be surprising if you know anything about the state of football games in the past 10 years. Impossible, you might say. I hate sports. Sports are dumb, and sports video games are even more dumb. No, you're wrong about that. You don't even have to like sports to like Tecmo Super Bowl. This game is nothing like any modern sports game you've played. Sports games today try as hard as possible to mimic reality. They're going for the most immersive, authentic experience that they can possibly create, and they go through great lengths to do this. They record thousands of lines of commentary from real-life sports broadcasters. They perform motion capture on professional athletes to get their digital doubles movements as lifelike as possible. They even work on the crowd's animations to make them look natural. They go all out these days to create the most genuine, true-to-life look and feel that they can. Tecmo Super Bowl doesn't do that. Mostly because it came out in 1991, and in those days, it was impossible to do so. It was also developed, as the name suggests, by Tecmo, a Japanese studio. Now, I'm pretty sure it goes without saying that American football doesn't have an audience in Japan. They've really accepted baseball, but American football is definitely not their thing. This is interesting to me because this Japanese studio decided they wanted to make a football game whose audience would primarily be in the United States. And they were also the very first studio to get licensing to portray all the real NFL teams, with accurate rosters and a season mode with schedules that actually align to that year's NFL calendar. Previously, Tecmo had made a game called Tecmo Bowl with similar game mechanics and style, but the teams represented all had to be made up. There were no real NFL teams in the game. This isn't why the game is so amazing though. It's part of the reason, but you have to be a sports fan to care about things like that. But I'll say again, you do not have to like sports games to like this game, and this is why. It just has the most charming Japanese flair ever. The music slays. It's amazing, to the point where I'll say it's one of the greatest video game soundtracks of all time. Just take a second and listen to this ending credits music. The whole soundtrack just shreds. It's unreal. I actually wish this music would play over broadcasts of real NFL games rather than the commentary. I also love the quintessentially anime action shots that appear when you pull off a great catch, throw under duress, block a kick, sack the quarterback, or score a touchdown. All of this fits under presentation, and this game's presentation is off the chain. But is it fun to play? You may be screaming at me now. Yes, it is. And I dare to say it is even if you don't particularly like sports. It's actually incredibly simple. There are only 8 plays total in any team's playbook, 4 running plays and 4 passing plays, which are tied to all the possible D-pad and button combinations on the NES. You can actually customize which plays appear in your team's playbook manually, which is a great touch and also opens up some interesting strategy. Both the offense and the defense have to select one of these 8 combinations before a play will begin, and depending on which play you choose, the advantage for that down will either lie with you or your opponent. For example, if I'm playing on defense and I pick the exact same play as the other team, my defensive line and linebacker core will ferociously blitz the quarterback unchecked by the offensive line, giving the quarterback maybe half a second to make a decision before he's slaughtered by 7 guys. On the other hand, if you pick a running play and the offense picks a passing play, the defense will cheat up to play the run and then let the receivers fly right past them, leaving them wide open for huge gains downfield and very likely an easy touchdown. However, if you pick a passing play and the opponent chooses to run, especially with players like Bo Jackson and Thurman Thomas, without careful skill and discipline, you're probably not going to touch these guys as they blow past you for an 80-yard touchdown. And that's the other thing I love about this game. While it may seem like there's a lot of luck involved, it actually requires both strategy and skill to win. Now, if you're not a sports fan and you've stuck with me this far, I'm proud of you. Now you get to know about an annual quest I've been on for the last 24 years. And this year, I found myself in a position to accomplish something I had never been able to do before. I got this game when I was 4 years old, and while it took a while for me to pick up on some of the nuances of the game's mechanics, I did fairly well. I played and replayed season mode for years, gradually increasing how well I did until I could win the Super Bowl pretty much without fail every time I tried. I never seemed to be able to move on from the game though, partly because modern NFL game developers don't actually try to make great games, but also because the appeal of Tecmo Super Bowl has never worn off. In order to find satisfaction in playing it, however, I had to come up with a new challenge, so I decided I was going to attempt a perfect season. This would include winning 19 games in a row, all 16 of the regular season games, as well as 2 playoff games, and of course the Super Bowl itself. Never could I have anticipated how difficult it is to do that. You see, Tecmo included a feature in the game that was meant to challenge all players no matter what their skill level may be. There isn't any difficulty level that you can select, so in place of that, they decided to increasingly handicap the player the more games they win in a row. Essentially, all the players in the game have stats that affect things like speed, catching ability, and so on. These are the things that the computer handicaps for your team the more you win, and improves for the computer the more it loses. In practice, what this means is that your running back will blow past defenders in the first 4 or 5 wins of the season, but with each game, he'll get a little slower, making it more and more difficult to turn those corners and make big plays. After 7 or 8 wins, it basically becomes impossible to run the ball at all. Inversely, the computer's offensive players get faster and faster, while your defenders get slower and slower. This makes it close to impossible to stop their running backs, even the least capable ones in the game, from turning what should be a 5-yard run into like a 60 or 70-yard run for a touchdown. In other words, the computer cheats in order to make the game harder, and normally I would hate that, but we're talking about NES level AI here. It wasn't exactly advanced enough to make fair difficulty for all players. However, learning the behaviors of this incredibly overpowered AI and learning to stop it can be both intense and satisfying. This has been my quest each year since I was 4 years old, to figure out the system that is purposefully stacked against me and beat it anyway. Usually, even on my best runs, I only get about 11 or 12 games into the season before I inevitably come up with a loss. After you take that loss, however, the computer resets its stat handicapping, making the next several games a cakewalk again. This is why it's been easy for me to win the Super Bowl, but so difficult to go undefeated. The deeper you make it into the regular season without a loss, the easier the playoffs become after finally getting one. The best I had ever done in the past was a 1-loss season, but this year I was determined to finally go all the way. And here I was. I found myself 15-0 going into the final week of the regular season. All I needed was one more win for a perfect record. Oh, of course then I'd have to win out in the playoffs, but I had never made it this far before. For me, I was on the verge of accomplishing something I had never done, and much of it was due to the new strategies I had employed this year. Here's how the game went down. Regardless of whether or not I win a coin toss, I always want to defer to the other team, meaning I let them have the ball first. The reason I do this is so that my team will get the ball at the beginning of the second half, and if I manage the clock correctly, I can go on a scoring drive right before halftime, then get the ball right back, essentially giving myself 2 possessions in a row and a chance to give myself an advantage late in the game. This is a big part of my strategy for beating a tough AI opponent, because usually what happens is that we just trade scores back and forth. So giving myself that lead really helps in case I end up turning the ball over late in the game. So I deferred here, giving the other team the ball first. Here's what happened on the first play.
Ready, down, hunt.
Yeah, that's basically how it goes at this stage. I made a mistake in playing the run because at this point I had become completely paranoid about my opponent's running game since it's so hard to stop. Usually I can tell pretty quickly if it's a fake or not, but here I didn't realize soon enough and I left a receiver wide open downfield. Not a good way to start the game. So then I put together a pretty decent drive, with one fairly lucky play where I threw into double coverage right before I got sacked and somehow came away without an interception. That's why I picked the Houston Oilers though, because on top of being born in Houston myself and growing up a huge Oilers fan, their receivers have the best stats in the game in terms of catching the ball, so they're actually able to do this quite often. And when you can't run the ball anymore and have to rely on the passing game to score, you need all the help you can get. After tying the game, I was actually able to get a stop and force the other team to punt, which is incredibly rare at this stage of the season with so many wins in a row. But I was only able to do so because I guessed right that they would run the ball on 3rd and 8. I gambled and it paid off. So now I figured as long as I can capitalize and score on this drive, I basically have this game in the bag. Oh, here you can see me running straight out of bounds because I'm just trying to avoid any chance of fumbling. And wouldn't you know, I got lucky again. After nearly being sacked, I had no one to throw the ball to, and I just tossed it into the end zone hoping for the best. And even though I threw into triple coverage, my man came down with the ball. This was a huge risk, and I probably should have just tried to run with the quarterback, but at this point, I'll take it. I was really starting to feel confident now. On their next drive, they busted out a couple of really big runs, where you can really start to see the difference in speed between their players and mine, which ended up in a long touchdown. Now you can see why I was so paranoid about the run on that first play of the game. So I got the ball back and I realized there wasn't very much time left on the clock. My plan here was to score with as little time left as possible, taking a 1-score lead into halftime, knowing that I'd get the ball right back again. I was successful in running the timeout and getting into a position to score, but I underestimated how much faster the defense was than me, and they stopped me right at the goal line. So I went into halftime tied rather than up by a touchdown, and I wasn't very happy about that. However, I was going to get the ball back right away, so I still had a chance to take the lead. I put together another methodical drive, chaining together solid play after solid play until I found myself within the 5-yard line. Then I decided to get cute and run the ball rather than continuing to pass. And I paid the price for it. At this point, you can imagine how furious I was. Instead of being up by 2 touchdowns, which would put me in a lead that's comfortable enough to basically secure victory, the game was tied and they had the ball. I now had to put together a stop if I wanted to win this game. And then this happened, on the very first play of their drive.
Ready, down, hunt.
After punching it in 2 plays later, the pressure was on me now. I had to score if I had any chance of coming away with a win now. I did not start out very well though, getting sacked for a big loss and bringing up 3rd and long. But I made a great play here to end the 3rd quarter and keep the drive alive. After another sustained chain of plays, I threw a touchdown to a guy who was well covered again. Thank goodness for the Oilers' amazing receivers. With lots of time left on the clock, things were looking hopeful. I just needed to get one stop.
Ready, down, hunt.
And then that happened on the first play of their drive. Look at it again. Their running back just massacred my linebacker here and blew past all of us. Now are you starting to see why I was so paranoid about the running game on that first play? It wasn't over yet though. I had the ball back and there were 2 minutes left. The best strategy here, again, is to wind the time down and try to score with no time left so as not to give them another chance. Because even with just one play, they could score another touchdown. Unfortunately, I did not end up using as much time as I would have liked. But even here, when they picked the same play as me and blitzed, I was able to quickly dump the ball off for a touchdown. Now, I just needed to stop them from scoring on one play. Just stop them for one play.
Ready, down, hunt.
Holy crap. You saw there that I was playing it as safely as I could. I just kept the back in front of me and tried to force him to the sideline rather than over pursuing and risking the chance of him getting past me. It worked, and we headed into overtime. Now, in the NFL back in these days, the rules stated that the first team to score wins, whether by a touchdown or a field goal. All I had to do to win here was score before they did, and much of that was going to depend on who won the coin toss. I ended up winning and getting the ball first. Luck was on my side again. All I had to do was score, and I would win. I'd have my perfect season. Again, here you see me running straight out of bounds to avoid the chance of fumbling. After driving deep into their territory, I saw my receiver break out in front of the defender. He had him beat. He was open, heading for the end zone. I threw the ball, the game was mine, and the defender somehow came away with it. You know, forget all those times earlier in the game where I threw into coverage and came away with the ball. No, now, when I made the right pass, it gets intercepted. I was freaking livid. Now it was on my defense. Could I put together a stop when I most needed it? Let's watch that one more time. Just look at how many of my guys ended up on the ground. We got demolished. It's like trying to tackle the Incredible Hulk. Just look at this BS. So yeah, that's how my quest for a perfect season ended this year. I ended up easily winning the Super Bowl, of course, because the stat handicap was reset, so I ended up 18-1 overall. But once again, I came up short of that 19-0 that I've been seeking. Remember this play right here before the end of the first half where I nearly scored? Remember when I fumbled on the 2-yard line? If I had been able to turn either of those plays into touchdowns, I might have been able to do it. But it seems it wasn't meant to be this time. Next year, guys. Next year. So yeah, that's Tecmo Super Bowl, one of the greatest video games ever made. If you haven't played it before, I highly suggest you try it out. The game even has a pretty big modding community online, and they've updated it with current rosters and everything. Even if you don't like sports though, the charm and simple strategic gameplay make it a blast to play. Try it out. You might even find that you like American football a little more than you originally thought. Until next week, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the comments.